When one of the most famous men alive decided to disappear, not for a vacation, not for a movie role, but to deliver pizza in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Orlando, Florida, nobody could have predicted what would happen at the very last house on the very last street of the night. This is the story of Shaquille O'Neal, 7 feet 1 inch tall, 4 NBA championships, a net worth that most people cannot even count to, a man so recognizable that his face has been on cereal boxes, shoe commercials, and billboards in cities he has never even visited. A man who, on a cold Tuesday evening in November of 2019, put on a thick fake beard, a beat-up baseball cap, a pair of dark glasses, and a shirt from a local pizza restaurant, and drove a cracked dashboard Toyota Camry through the streets of Paramore, knocking on strangers' doors, handing over warm boxes, and waiting to see how the world treated a man it did not recognize. He made 6 deliveries that night. The first 5 were fine, normal, forgettable. The 6th one changed everything, because at the end of a dead-end street called Mercy Court, a 16-year-old girl opened a green door. She looked directly at Shaquille O'Neal's face. She looked him right in the eyes, and she had absolutely no idea who he was. But here is what will stop you cold. On the wall behind her, visible through the open doorway, was a full-size poster, gold and purple, number 34. A man frozen mid-dunk, fierce and airborne and unstoppable. It was a poster of Shaq himself. She had grown up with his face on her wall. She had believed in him the way you believe in something when you have nothing else to hold on to. And now he was standing at her door, disguised, invisible, just the delivery guy. And she looked at him and told him the pizza was late and the garlic knots were cold, and handed him every single dollar she had. Exact change. Not a penny more. And Shaq stood on that porch in the dark and felt something crack open inside him that 30 years of fame and fortune and championship rings had never touched. But that is not even the most shocking part. The most shocking part, the detail that made Shaq go completely still when he found out, is something this girl had done 12 days before he ever knocked on her door. Something she posted late at night when she was exhausted and honest, and thought nobody important would ever see it. 3 words. That is all it was. 3 words typed into the quiet dark of a private account. 3 words that were aimed, without her ever knowing it, directly at the man who would soon be standing on her porch. And when Shaq found out what those 3 words were, he did not get angry. He did not feel hurt. He got back in the car, drove home in silence, called his assistant at 7 in the morning, and said, "Find out everything about this girl. Everything." What Brianna found in that folder changed the entire shape of this story. And what Shaq did with what she found, quietly, privately, without a single camera pointed at him, is the reason this story needs to be told. Stay with us through every chapter of this video, because the moment this story has been building toward, the moment everything finally makes sense, only arrives at the very end. And if you leave before you get there, you will miss the only part that actually matters. This is the real Shaquille O'Neal. Not the highlights, not the commercials, not the laugh on the television screen. This is the man who drove a Camry that smelled like oregano through the dark streets of Paramore and stood at a green door and heard 3 words that sent him back to everything he had come from. This is what happened next. Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal was born on March 6, 1972, in Newark, New Jersey. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, was 19 years old. She was barely an adult herself when she held him for the first time. She looked down at that baby boy and had no idea she was holding a future giant. Not just in size. In every way a person can be giant in this world. His father was not around. The family had almost nothing. They moved constantly. New Jersey, Georgia, Germany, San Antonio, following whatever small chance at a better life appeared on the horizon. They chased stability the way a kid chases a ball that keeps rolling just out of reach. You run. You almost touch it. It rolls a little further. You run again. Shaq grew so fast that his clothes never fit. One year he was just a tall kid. The next year he was something else entirely. Something the world had never quite seen before. Other kids laughed at him, called him names. He was too big, too tall, too much of everything that makes a child a target in a crowded school hallway. He remembered all of it, every single bit. He never forgot what it felt like to be the kid who didn't fit. By 2019, Shaquille O'Neal was 47 years old. He had been retired from the NBA for 8 years. During his career, he had earned over $292 million in salary alone. And that number didn't even count the endorsements, the business deals, the investments that most people his age were still dreaming about. He owned over 150 car washes across the country. He had 17 Auntie Anne's pretzel locations. He had 9 Papa John's restaurant franchises. He owned a movie theater, a shopping center, and, in one of the smartest moves of his life, he had taken a stake in a little company called Google before it even went public on the stock market. He had a doctorate degree in education from Barry University in Miami. A real one. He wrote the dissertation and everything. He was a television sports broadcaster for TNT's famous show Inside the NBA, sitting beside Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith and Ernie Johnson every week, making millions of people laugh while also teaching them things about the game. He was a reserve deputy sheriff in multiple counties across the United States, including Alachua County in Florida. He had a badge. He took it seriously. By every measure that the world uses to count success, Shaquille O'Neal had conquered everything there was to conquer. And yet, on a quiet night in October of 2019, something was pulling at him. It started like this. Shaq had just finished taping an episode of Inside the NBA in Atlanta. The show filmed at Turner Studios on Techwood Drive. After the cameras stopped rolling, he got on his private jet and flew back to Orlando. His driver, a quiet and dependable man named Earl Gibbs, who had worked for him for 6 years, met him at Orlando Executive Airport and drove him toward home. Home was a 31,000-square-foot mansion in Isleworth, a gated community in Windermere, a wealthy suburb just west of Orlando, the kind of neighborhood where the streets are perfectly smooth and every lawn looks like someone measures it with a ruler. But that night, Earl took a different route. Maybe it was traffic on the usual road. Maybe it was a wrong turn. Shaq never asked. But the car wound slowly through the streets of Paramore, one of the oldest and poorest neighborhoods in all of Central Florida. A community that sat just minutes from downtown Orlando's glittering skyline, but felt like a completely different world. Shaq looked out the tinted window. He saw a woman standing at a bus stop in the dark. She was wearing a thin jacket, too thin for the October night air. She was holding a plastic grocery bag in each hand. On her hip, balanced with the careful skill of someone who had done this 10,000 times, was a sleeping child. The child's shoes were on the wrong feet. Nobody had fixed them. Above the woman's head, the bus stop sign was cracked and covered in graffiti. There was no bench to sit on. There was no shelter from the wind. There was just a woman standing in the dark, holding everything she had, waiting for a bus that had not come. Shaq watched her until the car turned the corner and she disappeared from view. He didn't say a word to Earl. He didn't sleep that night. He lay in his enormous house, in his enormous bed, and stared at the ceiling and thought about that woman, about her shoes, about the child's shoes on the wrong feet, about the broken sign, about the fact that she was standing in a city where he owned 9 restaurants, and she was standing in the dark with no bench. 3 days later, he called Brianna. Brianna Calloway had been managing Shaq's schedule since 2016. She was sharp, organized, and after 3 years on the job, she had developed a specific skill. She could tell, from the first 2 seconds of a phone call, which version of Shaq was on the other end of the line. There was the excited Shaq, who talked fast and got loud. There was the business Shaq, who got straight to the point. There was the playful Shaq, who opened with a joke before he said anything real. And then there was the quiet Shaq. The quiet Shaq was the one who meant it. This was the quiet Shaq. "I want to do something," he said. "No cameras, no press release, no publicist texting TMZ 15 minutes before it happens. I want to actually see how people live in Paramore. Not from a car window, not from a seat at a charity dinner. I want to be in it." Brianna listened. She wrote it down. She always wrote everything down. "What are you thinking?" she asked. There was a pause on the line, a long one. "Get me a job," Shaq said, "delivering pizza." Brianna stopped writing. "Sir?" "Pizza delivery. I want to be the guy who knocks on the door. I want to see what people look like when they answer. I want to see their homes, their faces, how they talk to somebody they think is nobody important." He paused again. "Nobody treats the delivery guy like he's a real person. I want to know what that feels like." Brianna picked her pen back up. She wrote it all down. "And Bree," he added, just before she could respond, "figure out how to make me not look like me." She stared at what she had written on the notepad. Get Shaq a pizza job, make him invisible. She thought about that for a moment. There was only one Shaquille O'Neal on the entire planet. You could put a hat on a mountain, but it was still a mountain. But she was going to try. Brianna Calloway did not panic easily. She had once rescheduled 3 international flights, a live television appearance, and a charity auction in the same afternoon, because Shaq had decided, on very short notice, to personally deliver school supplies to a group of kids in Baton Rouge. She had handled that without raising her voice. She had handled that with a cup of coffee and a notepad, and the calm, steady focus of someone who understood that impossible just meant it would take a little longer than usual. But this was different. She sat at her desk in her home office in Orlando and looked at what she had written. Get Shaq a pizza job. Make him invisible. She underlined the second sentence. Then she put her pen down. Then she picked it up again. The problem was not the pizza job. She could make calls. She could find a restaurant. She could arrange a uniform. That part was manageable. The problem, the enormous 7 foot 1 inch, 325-pound problem, was the second part. Because Shaquille O'Neal was not a man you could simply hide. His face had been on cereal boxes, shoe commercials, movie posters, and the side of a Pepsi truck. He had a gap-toothed smile that had been photographed more times than most national landmarks. He had hands the size of serving platters. He had a laugh that could fill a gymnasium. You did not make Shaquille O'Neal invisible. But she was going to try. She made one call first. A name she had used before for unconventional problems. A costume and makeup artist named Terrence Whitfield, based in Atlanta, who had spent 12 years working in the Georgia film industry. Terrence had worked on productions where actors needed to become completely unrecognizable. Different ages, different builds, different faces entirely. He was the kind of craftsman who treated a human face the way a sculptor treats a block of marble. Patient, precise, completely without ego about the work. Brianna explained the situation. Terrence laughed for almost 30 seconds. "You're serious," he said, when Brianna's silence made it clear she was. "I am very serious," she said. He flew to Orlando on November 4th, 2019. Shaq met him in a private room at a hotel near the Orlando airport, neutral ground, away from staff and cameras. Terrence spent the first hour doing nothing but observing. He walked around Shaq slowly. He asked him to stand naturally, to sit, to walk across the room. He studied the way Shaq held his shoulders, the way his head moved when he talked, the specific gravity of him, the way a room seemed to rearrange itself slightly when he entered, as if the furniture knew to make space. "The size I cannot fix," Terrence said finally. "Nobody is going to look at this man and think he is small. That is not possible, and I will not pretend otherwise." "So what can you fix?" Brianna asked. "I can fix famous," Terrence said. "Famous is not about size. Famous is about the face people expect to see. I change the face. I change the story." The plan came together over the following week. A thick, full beard, dark and dense, covering Shaq's jaw and chin and changing the entire shape of his face. A beat-up Orlando Magic baseball cap, pulled down low over his forehead. Ironic, given that Shaq had worn the Magic uniform from 1992 to 1996, had been the face of that franchise, had sold out every game in the arena during those years. The cap was old and faded, the kind of cap that said, "I bought this at a gas station," not, "I played for this team." A pair of large, dark-rimmed glasses that sat heavy on the nose and caught the light in a way that drew the eye away from everything behind them. The clothing mattered too. Not a disguise in the theatrical sense. No fake nose, no wig. Just ordinary, forgettable. The kind of clothes a person wears when they are trying to get through the day, not be looked at. And then there was the uniform. Brianna had spent 4 days identifying the right restaurant. It needed to be real. It needed to be local. It needed to be the kind of place that delivered to Paramore, a neighborhood that many chain restaurants quietly avoided listing in their delivery zones, which was its own kind of cruelty. She found Sal's Hot Slice, a real restaurant on West Colonial Drive in Orlando, family-owned, open since 2011. Known for thick crust pizza and garlic knots that regular customers talked about with the specific devotion that people reserve for things that have never let them down. The owner was a Lebanese-American man named Faris Nasir, who had come to Orlando in 1998. worked in restaurant kitchens for 9 years and opened Sal's with his wife Hanan, using a loan from her parents and every dollar they had saved. Brianna called Ferris on a Wednesday morning. She did not tell him who the call was about at first. She explained only that a well-known public figure wanted to spend one evening working as a delivery driver, entirely incognito, and that she needed a partner restaurant willing to keep the secret absolutely. From staff, from family, from everyone. Ferris said he needed to think about it. He called back 11 minutes later. "Who is it?" he said. Brianna told him. The line went completely silent for 5 full seconds. "Shaquille O'Neal," Ferris repeated. Not a question, just the words, repeated slowly. The way you repeat something when your brain needs a second pass to accept it as real. "Yes," Brianna said. Another silence. "He wants to work at my restaurant." "For one night," Brianna said. "Delivering pizza." "Yes." Ferris exhaled a long breath. "My wife is never going to believe this." "Your wife cannot know," Brianna said. "Nobody can know. That is the condition." Ferris agreed. He kept the secret the way a man keeps a secret when he understands that some things are bigger than the urge to tell somebody. The uniform was the final challenge. Sal's hot slice shirts were made for regular people, and their largest size was a 3XL. Terrence sourced a 7XL from a custom workwear shop in Tampa and drove it down personally. He had the Sal's logo embroidered on by hand, red thread on black fabric, slightly uneven at the edges in the way that handmade things always are, which only made it look more real. Even then, the shirt pulled across Shaq's shoulders like a flag fighting a strong wind. On November 12, 2019, a Tuesday evening, a 2014 Honda Accord belonging to Brianna Calloway pulled quietly into the back lot of Sal's Hot Slice at 4:30 in the afternoon. Not a Range Rover, not a Bentley, a Honda Accord. Because a Honda Accord is the most invisible car in America. Shaq unfolded himself from the back seat, knees to chest, sideways through the door, and walked into the restaurant through the back entrance. 45 minutes later, Terrence stepped back and studied his work. Shaq stood in front of a small bathroom mirror. The beard was thick and dark. The cap was low. The glasses sat heavy and serious on his face. In the yellow bathroom light, the shape of him was still enormous. That part, as Terrence had said from the beginning, was not fixable. But famous? Famous was gone. He looked like a man who delivered pizza. He looked like a man named Clarence, because that was the name Ferris used when he introduced him to the small evening staff. A young woman named Deja, 17, who was working the dough station, and 2 other kitchen staff who nodded briefly and went back to work. Nobody questioned a new driver named Clarence. Restaurants turned over delivery staff the way rivers turned over water. Deja looked up at him once. "You are really tall," she said. "I get that a lot," said Clarence, in a voice that was slightly lower and flatter than Shaq's own. Deja nodded and went back to work. Shaq was handed a thermal warming bag, a receipt printer, and the keys to a 2018 Toyota Camry that smelled like oregano and had a long crack running across the passenger side dashboard. He was given 6 delivery orders for the evening, spread across a 10-mile radius, 4 addresses in surrounding Orlando neighborhoods, 2 in Paramore. Brianna was already parked around the corner in the Honda. Beside her was a cameraman named Obi Ferreira. One small camera, no lights, no crew. Two security guards stayed further back, far enough to be unseen, close enough to matter if they needed to. Shaq adjusted the cap, picked up the warming bag, walked out into the Orlando evening. He folded himself into the Camry. His head nearly brushed the ceiling. He sat for just a moment with his hands on the wheel, looking through the windshield at the parking lot, the streetlights just beginning to glow in the early dark. Then Shaquille O'Neal disappeared, and Clarence started the engine and drove. The Camry drove like a car that had lived a full life. The steering pulled slightly to the left. The radio was stuck on a country station that nobody had bothered to change. The heat worked, but only on one side. The driver's seat was worn down in the middle, shaped by years of people who were not 7 feet 1 inch tall, which meant that Shaq sat with his knees angled outward like a man trying to fit inside a shoebox he had already outgrown. He didn't complain. He drove. The first order was a house on Mercy Drive, a wide residential street near the Millennium Mall on the west side of Orlando. A neighborhood that was comfortable without being wealthy. The houses had driveways. The driveways had cars. The yards were mowed. The kind of street where people had enough and knew it, even if they never said so out loud. He pulled up to the address, checked the boxes. Cheese and pepperoni, 2 larges, and a 2-liter Coke. He grabbed the warming bag, walked up the front path, and knocked. The door swung open almost immediately. A young man stood there, late 20s, broad shoulders, wearing a college football jersey with the number 12 on it. His name, according to the receipt, was Brandon Ferris. Behind him, from somewhere deeper in the house, came the specific electronic roar of a video game in full battle. Explosions, voices, music layered on top of music. Brandon looked up. His eyes traveled upward. They kept going. They went past where most people's eyes stopped when they met someone new and kept climbing, the way eyes do when they have never had to go that high before. "Whoa," Brandon said. He said it the way people say it when their brain sends the word before they can decide whether to let it out. "You are massive, man." "Thanks," said Clarence. "Flat, easy. Sal's hot slice, 2 large pizzas, and a Coke." Brandon paid. He handed over the cash, took his change, and tipped $4 without making a production of it. $4, extended in a loose handful, given with the casual generosity of someone who had once worked a service job and not forgotten what it felt like. He took the boxes. He went back inside. The door closed on the sound of the video game. Simple. Normal. Fine. Shaq walked back to the Camry, slid in sideways, and sat for a moment before he put the car in drive. He thought about the $4 tip. He thought about how much Brandon had not thought about it. He thought about how not thinking about it was its own kind of kindness. He drove. The second delivery was an apartment building on South Orange Blossom Trail, a long, busy commercial road that cut through the heart of Orlando like a seam. Shaq knew this road well. He had driven it hundreds of times over the years, but he had always driven it in vehicles with tinted windows and leather seats. He had never driven it in a cracked dashboard Camry at dusk with someone else's order on the passenger seat. The building was mid-range, clean enough, a fountain out front that wasn't running, a security panel at the lobby door that someone had propped open with a folded piece of cardboard. He rode the elevator to the 4th floor, knocked on apartment 412. The woman who answered was maybe 65 years old, in a house coat the color of autumn leaves. with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and the particular unhurried composure of someone who had stopped being impressed by much of anything. Her name on the receipt was G. Okoye. She looked at the warming bag. She looked at the boxes. She checked the order against the receipt with quiet, methodical care. The way a person checks things when they have learned from experience that nobody else is going to catch a mistake for you. Then she looked up at Shaq, not at the size of him, just at his face. "Thank you, young man," she said. She said it simply. No performance, no hesitation. Like it was the obvious thing to say to a person who had just brought something to your door. She gave him a firm handshake, not the loose, one-handed grip people give delivery drivers, but a real handshake, 2 hands around his enormous one. She held it for just a second longer than necessary. Then she nodded once, took her boxes, and closed the door with the soft click of someone who had every intention of enjoying her evening. Shaq stood in the hallway for a moment. He liked her immediately. He liked her in the way you like someone who has lived enough life to know that basic courtesy costs nothing and means everything. He rode the elevator back down. He drove. The third delivery was a subdivision north of Lee Vista, near the flight path of Orlando International Airport. Planes came over low and regular overhead, their bellies lit up against the darkening sky. The house was large and well-maintained. Flower beds along the front, a basketball hoop in the driveway with the net still intact, which told Shaq something about the family inside. People who bought things and took care of them. He knocked. A boy answered the door. 10 years old, maybe 11. Small for his age, with serious eyes and the focused expression of a child who had been given a job to do and was going to do it correctly. The boy was wearing a jersey, a gold and purple Los Angeles Lakers jersey, number 34. The name on the back, O'Neal. Shaq saw it the moment the door opened. He saw it, and something moved through him, a warm, strange current, like recognizing your own handwriting in a place you don't remember writing. The boy was not looking at the delivery man's face. He was focused on the warming bag with the single-minded attention of a child who had been thinking about pizza for quite some time. "Mom said to give you this," the boy said, and extended a folded $10 bill with both hands, the way children hand things over when they have been told this is important. Shaq took it. "Thank you," said Clarence. He passed over the boxes. The boy took them in both arms, adjusted his grip, and then, just before he turned to go back inside, Shaq spoke. "Nice jersey," he said. The boy looked down at himself. He seemed, for just a moment, to have genuinely forgotten what he was wearing. Then he looked back up. "Oh, yeah, Shaq," he said, as though this explained everything, which to him it clearly did. "He's the best ever. Nobody will ever be like him. My dad says so, and my dad is right about everything." Shaq held very, very still. "You really think so?" said Clarence. The boy looked at him with the mild impatience of someone being asked to explain something obvious. "Obviously," he said. Then he turned, balanced the boxes carefully, and walked back into the house. The door closed with a soft thud. Shaq stood on the porch. He did not move for a moment. The evening air came in across the yard and moved through the trees at the edge of the property, and a plane went over low and bright and loud, and Shaq stood on the porch in his Sal's hot slice shirt and his borrowed glasses, and he breathed. He walked back to the Camry, He sat in the driver's seat for 60 full seconds without starting the engine. He looked at the steering wheel. He looked at his hands, his enormous, famous, unmistakable hands, resting on it. The hands that had dunked on every great center of his generation. The hands that had signed a contract for $120 million in 1996. The hands that had held 4 championship trophies. A 10-year-old boy in his jersey had just handed him a folded $10 bill without looking at his face once. He started the engine. The fourth delivery was a group of college students in Conway, east of downtown. Loud, warm, cheerful in the sprawling, slightly chaotic way that people are cheerful when they are young and have nowhere specific to be. One of them tried to tip him in quarters, piling them into his palm with great seriousness. Another one squinted up at him and said, "How tall are you, man?" And Shaq said 6'4", and the student looked openly unconvinced, but let it go because the pizza had arrived, and that was the priority. They were good. They were fine. They were the kind of people who would tell this story for years. The delivery driver was absolutely massive, I'm telling you. The man was enormous, and it would get funnier every time. Shaq drove back toward the west side of the city. He checked the 2 remaining addresses on his phone. Both were in Paramore. The streets changed as he drove south. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. The way weather changes when a front is coming through. The lawns got smaller. The trees got thinner. The light got darker. Not because the sun was setting differently here, but because there were fewer streetlights, and the ones that existed were older and dimmer, and some of them were simply out. A dollar store sat on one corner, a bail bonds office on the other. A group of men outside a laundromat stood in the particular stillness of people who had been outside long enough that outside had become inside for them. 3 children rode their bikes in the road because the sidewalks were too cracked and uneven to use safely. And then, on a corner, painted in uneven white letters on the side of a cinder block wall, a sign that someone had put there because they needed to say it, even if no one official was going to say it for them. God knows your name even when the world does not. Shaq read it once. Then he read it again. He turned onto Lime Avenue and made his 5th delivery. A man in paint-stained clothes with tired eyes who paid in exact change, said thank you like he meant every syllable of it, and tipped $1 in a way that suggested the dollar had come from somewhere real. Shaq thanked him. He got back in the Camry. He looked at the last address on his phone. Mercy Court. He had 1 delivery left. He didn't know yet what was waiting at the end of that road. He didn't know about the girl. He didn't know about the birthday crown. He didn't know about the poster on the wall. He just knew the address. He typed it in. He drove. Mercy Court was the kind of street that didn't show up in Orlando tourism brochures. It was a dead-end road, short and narrow. The pavement ending 30 feet before the last property did, and becoming a dirt path that absorbed rain and held it for days afterward. The streetlight nearest the end of the block had been dark for months. Nobody had reported it, or maybe somebody had reported it and nothing had happened, which was its own kind of answer. The only light came from the houses themselves, warm yellow rectangles pushing through curtained windows into the dark outside. Shaq pulled the Camry slowly to the curb at the end of Mercy Court and looked at the address on his phone. He looked at the house in front of him. It was small, single-story. A chain-link fence ran along the front of the yard, and along the inside of that fence, someone had planted a row of marigolds, orange and yellow, still holding on in the November cold. They were the most deliberate, the most cared-for thing on the entire block. Those flowers. Someone had put them there on purpose. Someone had knelt in that dirt and planted them and watered them and decided that this small piece of ground deserved something beautiful growing out of it. Shaq looked at the marigolds for a moment. He picked up the warming bag, checked the order one last time. 1 large cheese pizza, 1 order of garlic knots, total $18.74. The name on the receipt, M. Denton. He opened the car door, unfolded himself onto the street, and walked up the dirt path to the front door. The door was dark green. The paint was peeling at the corners, curling back in thin strips the way paint does when it has been too long without attention, and the Florida humidity has gotten underneath it. Near the doorbell, stuck at eye level, or what would have been eye level for most people, was a small sticker, oval-shaped, faded from years of sun, an Orlando Magic sticker. The old design from the early 1990s stuffed the Magic Dragon, the team's cartoon mascot, grinning with a basketball under one arm. Shaq had been a member of the Orlando Magic when that sticker was made. He had signed merchandise with that logo. He had worn that uniform. He stood on the front porch of a house in Paramore and looked at a faded sticker from a chapter of his own life. And he felt the specific strangeness of a man confronting his own history in a place he never expected to find it. He knocked. From inside, footsteps, quick ones first, light, fast, a child's feet on a hard floor, then heavier ones behind, measured and deliberate. The door opened. The girl in the doorway was 16 years old. Her name was Marisol Denton. She was small, 5'2", slender, with box braids pulled back tight against her head. She was wearing a school uniform, navy blue pants, a white collared shirt. The shirt had a small stain on the left sleeve near the cuff, like she had been cooking and gotten too close to whatever was on the stove. Her eyes were dark brown and very steady. They were the eyes of a person who had learned early that the world moved faster and harder than most people admitted, and who had decided, somewhere along the way, to meet it straight on. She did not look at the delivery man the way people look at someone they're about to greet. She looked at the warming bag. Behind her, through the open doorway, Shaq took in the front room, in the way that a person takes in a room when they are trying not to look like they are looking. A couch against the far wall, one cushion covered by a folded blanket, hiding something underneath, a tear or a spring that had given up. A small television on a folding table, the kind of table meant for card games, not for living rooms. A bookshelf made entirely of milk crates stacked on their sides, filled with paperback books and folders and the organized clutter of a household that had figured out how to work with what it had. School textbooks stacked in a careful tower near the front door, ready for morning. On the floor, a small boy, maybe 6 years old, sitting cross-legged in socks, bent over a piece of paper, drawing something in crayon with the absolute total concentration of a child for whom the drawing was the most important thing in the world. On his head, tilted sideways at a cheerful angle, was a paper birthday crown, the kind that schools make for students on their birthdays. Thin cardboard, gold and yellow, slightly too big for his head, slipping slowly toward his left ear. And on the wall above him, a poster, full size, mounted high, almost to the ceiling. A man in gold and purple, airborne, body fully extended, face fierce and unstoppable and alive, with the specific joy of doing the thing you were made to do. Shaquille O'Neal, Los Angeles Lakers, mid-dunk, number 34. His own face looked back at him from the wall of this small house on a dead-end street on the darkest block in Paramore. Shaq looked at the poster, then at the girl, then at the poster again. "Sal's hot slice," said Clarence. "Cheese pizza and garlic knots." Marisol looked at the bag, then at him. Not at his face, not at the size of him, just at the bag. The way you look at the thing you ordered when you are checking whether it has arrived correctly. "You're late," she said. Not aggressive, not loud, not the performed anger of someone who wants a scene. It was something quieter and more honest than that. The flat, tired statement of a person for whom this was simply one more thing that had not gone the way it was supposed to. Shaq checked the time. Order placed at 6:45. It was 7:23. The traffic on Colonial was... "I don't care about the traffic," she said. She said it the way people say things when they have been waiting for something small that they needed to go right, and it didn't. And they are too exhausted to soften the edges of that disappointment for the benefit of a stranger. She was not cruel. She was not entitled. She was 16 years old, and she had been waiting since 6:45. And her brother had been waiting longer than that, and the pizza was late, and the garlic knots were going to be cold. "My brother has been asking for this since before I even ordered it," she said. "It's his birthday. He's 6. "I'm sorry," Shaq said. And he meant it in a way that went beyond the pizza. Marisol took the warming bag from his hands and opened it. She lifted the lid of the garlic knot box with one finger and felt the temperature of it through the cardboard in the practiced, efficient way of someone who had been let down before and learned to verify everything before she let herself feel relieved. She pressed her palm flat against the top of the box. "These are cold," she said. "They were in the warmer the whole drive." "I can feel that they're cold," she said, not yelling, just correcting, just stating the fact she could feel with her own hand. From the floor, the boy looked up. The birthday crown slipped another inch toward his ear. "Is that the pizza?" he said. Marisol's face changed. In the space between one breath and the next, everything hard in it went somewhere else. Her voice changed. Her shoulders changed. The way she held herself changed. From someone braced against the world to someone opening toward one specific person in it. "Yeah, baby," she said, and her voice was warm and low and full of a love so complete it had no edges. "Come to the table." The boy scrambled up from the floor with the joyful, uncoordinated energy of a child who has been sitting still for too long. His birthday crown fell off completely. He picked it up, jammed it back on his head at an even more extreme angle, and ran toward the kitchen with his arms spread wide like an airplane finding its runway. Marisol watched him go, just for a second. Just long enough for something soft and private to cross her face before she turned back to the door. She reached into the pocket of her navy school pants and pulled out a small fold of bills. She counted it out without hesitation. A 10, a 5, 3 ones, and then 2 quarters pulled from a separate pocket, found by feel, placed into her palm with the precision of someone who had already done this math, already decided, before the pizza even arrived, exactly what she had and what it would cost and how those 2 numbers would meet. She placed $18.74 into Shaq's waiting hand. Exact change. Not a cent more. She began to close the door. "Ma'am," Shaq said. He didn't plan it. Something just pulled at him. A feeling he couldn't name and couldn't stop. He looked at the poster on the wall. He looked at the boy in the kitchen, already climbing into his chair with the crown back on. He looked at the fold of bills that had moved from her hand to his. She stopped. She looked at him. Really looked, for the first time. Not at the bag. At the man. She saw a very large person in a Sal's hot slice shirt and a dark cap and big glasses. She saw the delivery guy. She saw Clarence. She did not see anything else. "What?" she said. Shaq looked at his own face on the wall behind her. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He said, "Happy birthday to your brother." The door closed. He stood alone on the dirt path in the dark. The marigolds were pale shapes along the fence. From somewhere inside the house, he could hear the small, muffled sounds of a 6-year-old boy celebrating his birthday with a cheese pizza and a tilted paper crown, having no idea that the man in the poster on his wall had just been standing at his front door. Shaq did not move for a long time. The night was cold. The marigolds held on. He walked back to the Camry. Not quickly, not slowly, just walked, the way a person walks when their body is moving and their mind is somewhere else entirely. The dirt path was soft under his feet from recent rain. The chain-link fence caught the distant light from a working streetlight half a block away. The marigolds were small and pale in the dark, but they were there. He reached the car. He did not get in. He stood beside the driver's door and placed both palms flat on the roof of the Camry. The metal was cold. Not uncomfortable cold. Just real cold. Present cold. The kind that reminds you that you have hands, and the hands are here, and this is the world, and you are standing in it right now, not watching it from somewhere warm and far away. He pressed his palms down and breathed. Brianna was parked around the corner. She had been watching the small tablet screen that received Obi's camera feed. She had seen him walk up the path. She had seen the door open. She had seen the exchange, not heard it. The audio was faint at that distance, but she had seen the body language. She had seen Marisol's posture. She had seen the door close. She had seen Shaq stand on the path without moving. Now she watched him standing at the car with his hands on the roof, and she knew, with the specific knowledge of someone who had worked closely with a person for years, that something had happened that was larger than a pizza delivery. Her phone screen lit up. She typed, "You okay?" Around the corner, Shaq felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He didn't reach for it. He stood there another 30 seconds. Then he opened the car door and folded himself inside. He sat. He did not start the engine. He rested his hands on the steering wheel and looked through the windshield at the dead end of Mercy Court, at the place where the pavement gave up and became dirt, at the dark beyond the last house, at the thin strip of orange-gray sky above the roof lines where the city's light bounced back off the clouds. He reached into the pocket of the warming bag and found the bills she had given him. He spread them flat on his knee. A 10, a 5, 3 ones, 2 quarters, $18.74. He looked at them for a long time. The thing about exact change, the thing that was sitting heavy in the center of his chest right now, was what it meant. Exact change meant she had known. Before she picked up the phone to place the order, before she typed in the address, before she selected the cheese pizza and the garlic knots and confirmed the total, she had already counted what she had. She had spread those bills and those quarters out on a table somewhere in that small house, and she had done the math. She had said, "This is what I have, and this is what it costs, and I will spend all of it, because today is his birthday, and he asked for pizza, and that is what he is going to get." She had not left herself a tip. She had not left herself anything. Shaq thought about that in the particular way you think about something when it reaches past all the layers of success and comfort and distance you have built up over decades and touches something original in you, something that was there before the contracts and the championships and the car washes and the doctorate degree. Something that was there when you were a kid whose clothes never fit, moving from one base to the next, watching your mother make nothing into enough through the sheer stubborn force of her love. He knew what that math felt like. He had not done it in 30 years, but he knew it. He thought about the boy, Theo. He didn't know the name yet, but he would. Sitting cross-legged on the floor in his socks, with his birthday crown tilting sideways, drawing something in crayon, completely absorbed, completely happy in the specific total way that 6-year-olds are happy when the world has not yet taught them to be anything else. That boy did not know what the numbers looked like. He did not know about the bills spread out on the table. He did not know that his birthday pizza had been calculated in advance down to the quarters. He just knew that his sister had said, "Yeah, baby, come to the table," and that was enough. That was the whole world, and she had chosen that for him. Shaq had grown up with a mother who did that, who made the hard things invisible so the children could be children, who said, "I'm not hungry" on the nights there wasn't enough, said it so easily and so convincingly that it took years before Shaq understood what it had actually meant. Lucille O'Neill had been doing the same math in Newark and Georgia and San Antonio that Marisol Denton was doing right now on Mercy Court in Orlando. Different decades, different city, same math, same love, same decision. That the person in front of me deserves the whole thing, and I will take whatever is left, and I will not make it their burden to know. He had said in interviews that his mother was the strongest person he had ever known. He still believed that. He believed it more right now than he ever had. He thought about the poster, his own face, 10 feet tall on the wall of that small living room, gold and purple. Number 34, mid-dunk. That photograph had been taken during the 1999 to 2000 season, his first season with the Lakers, the season that started a dynasty. He had been 27 years old in that photograph. He had been at the absolute peak of every physical thing a human body can do. He remembered that dunk. He remembered the sound of the crowd. He had seen that image on so many walls over the years, in barbershops and sports bars and children's bedrooms and college dorm rooms. He had signed versions of it 1,000 times, maybe more. He knew what it meant to the people who put it up. It meant something about possibility, something about a person from nothing becoming something so enormous and undeniable that the whole world had to stop and look. He knew that. He had built an entire public life on being that for people. But he had never, until tonight, stood in a room where that poster hung over a family that was counting quarters, where the person who had looked up at that image her whole life, who had kept it on the wall even after everything that had put it there had fallen apart, had kept it up because a little boy needed something to believe in, had just handed the man in the poster $18.74 in exact change and told him the garlic knots were cold. She had a poster of him on her wall. She had looked him right in the face. She had not seen him. And the reason she hadn't seen him, the reason she had looked at the delivery man and seen only the delivery man, was because that was what he had chosen to be tonight. He had wanted to be invisible. He had wanted to see the world from the bottom of it, from the door-knocking, tip-receiving, Camry-driving bottom of it. He had wanted to know what it felt like to be the person the world looked through. He had found out, and it felt like nothing he had expected. Because the world had not looked through Clarence tonight. Marisol Denton had not looked through him. She had looked at him with complete directness and told him the pizza was late and the garlic knots were cold, and then handed him every dollar she had. She had treated him like a person, not a celebrity, not a symbol, not a man worth $400 million. A person. And somehow, that was the thing that cracked him open. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out. Brianna's message was still there from before. "You okay?" Below it, a new one. "Obi got everything. Clean footage. We can head back whenever you're ready." Shaq looked at the screen. He looked at the 47 unread text messages, the emails from agents and property managers and television producers, the Instagram notifications stacked up in their thousands, all of it waiting, all of it patient, all of it entirely certain that he would get back to it eventually because he always did, because that was the life he had built. He typed back to Brianna, "Give me the name on that last order." A pause. Then, "Monsieur Denton." "Why?" He looked back through the windshield at the house on Mercy Court. The yellow light still pushed through the curtain. Somewhere behind that curtain, a 6-year-old boy in a paper crown was eating birthday pizza. "Find out everything you can," Shaq typed. "First thing tomorrow. Everything." "Okay," Brianna wrote. Then, after a brief pause, "You sure you're all right?" He thought about the marigolds. He thought about the exact change. He thought about the way Marisol's voice had changed, had gone from flat and guarded to warm and open in less than a second. The moment she spoke to her little brother, he thought about what it took to carry all of that at 16 years old and still plant flowers along the fence. "No," he typed back, "but I will be." He put the phone in his pocket. He sat in the dark for one more moment. Then, Shaquille O'Neal, a man with 4 championship rings and 150 car washes and a private jet and a 31,000-square-foot house 12 miles from this dead-end street, started the engine of a borrowed Camry that smelled like oregano and pulled slowly away from the curb on Mercy Court. He did not look back. He didn't need to. He was already carrying everything he had seen inside with him, and he knew, the way you know certain things when they settle into the deepest part of you, that he was going to be carrying it for a very long time. Brianna Calloway did not sleep much that night either. She was home by 10. She made tea. She didn't drink. She sat at her desk with her laptop open and her notepad beside it, and she started pulling threads. She had done this kind of research before. Background checks, charity vetting, due diligence on business partners. She was methodical. She was thorough. She did not cut corners, and she did not stop when she found the easy surface answer, because she had learned working for Shaq that the easy surface answer was almost never the whole story. She started with the name, Marisol Alexis Denton, 16 years old, Orlando, Florida. By 7 in the morning, she had a folder. By 10, she had filled it. Marisol was a junior at Evans High School on West Colonial Drive, a real school, a Title I school, where more than 90% of students qualified for free or reduced-price lunch. The building had been there since 1954. It had educated generations of Orlando families who lived in the neighborhoods the city's tourism industry preferred not to photograph. The teachers there worked harder than most people understood and were paid less than most people realized. It was the kind of school where a good counselor could change the entire direction of a student's life, and where a bad year, a sick parent, a lost job, an eviction could just as easily undo everything. Marisol's GPA was 3.8. Brianna read that twice. A 3.8 GPA, maintained while working 2 part-time jobs, while managing a household, while raising a little brother in all the ways that mattered day to day. Brianna wrote it down and underlined it and sat with it for a moment before she kept going. Marisol was in the school's debate club, had been since freshman year. In 9th grade, she had won a regional essay competition, placing first out of 47 students from 6 different schools. The essay topic had been, "What does justice mean in your community?" Brianna found a summary of it in a local Orlando education newsletter from 2018. She read it slowly. Marisol had written about her neighborhood, about the broken streetlights and the missing benches and the dollar stores and the bail bonds offices and the way certain zip codes in Central Florida had been systematically underfunded for so long that the underfunding had started to feel like the natural order of things, as though Paramore had simply been born that way rather than made that way by specific decisions made by specific people over specific decades. She had written about it clearly and without self-pity, and with the precision of someone who had not only lived inside the problem, but had stood back far enough to see its shape. She was 15 years old when she wrote it. Brianna sat back in her chair. She kept going. The summer before her junior year, Marisol had been accepted into a prestigious pre-law enrichment program at the University of Central Florida, a 6-week residential program for high-achieving students from underserved communities. Competitive admission, full academic curriculum, the kind of opportunity that looked extraordinary on a college application and, more importantly, gave students a genuine first look at what a university education actually felt like from the inside. The scholarship had covered 80% of the cost. The remaining 20%, roughly $340, the family could not cover. Marisol had not gone. Brianna wrote that number down. $340. She stared at it. She thought about the 9 Papa John's restaurants. She thought about the 150 car washes. She thought about what $340 looked like from inside a 31,000 square foot house in Isleworth versus what it looked like from inside a house on Mercy Court with a bookshelf made of milk crates. She kept going. Darlene Denton, Marisol's mother, was a certified nursing assistant at Orlando Regional Medical Center on Orange Avenue, one of the busiest and most demanding trauma hospitals in the state of Florida. She worked 6 days a week, double shifts when they were available, because double shifts paid more, and the regular shifts alone were not enough. On her one day off, she was usually too exhausted to do much beyond rest. She had been doing this since 2016, which was the year Marisol's father, Gregory Denton, a man who had loved the Orlando Magic and Shaquille O'Neal with the devoted loyalty of someone who needed heroes, had left the family. Marisol had been 13. Theo had been 2. Gregory Denton had left behind most of his belongings when he went: clothes, some tools, a box of old sports memorabilia, and on the bedroom wall, still mounted where he had put it years before, a full-size poster of Shaquille O'Neal in gold and purple, mid-dunk, number 34, fierce and airborne and unstoppable. Marisol had moved the poster from the bedroom to the living room, not because she wanted to look at it, because Theo did, because Theo had grown up standing in front of it, looking up at the enormous flying man, the way children look at things they cannot fully understand, but feel the power of completely. Because, at some point, Theo had decided, with the total unquestioning confidence of a very small child, that the man in the poster was the strongest person in the entire world. And Marisol had never corrected him. She had let him have that. She had let him keep believing it. The way she let him keep believing in a lot of things she no longer fully believed in herself. Brianna found all of this in records, in school documents, in the careful paper trail that a life leaves behind whether it means to or not. And then she found the Instagram post. It was on a private account that Marisol rarely used. Mostly photographs. Theo on his first day of school, a sunrise over the Paramore rooftops, a debate club trophy being held up by 2 girls in Evans High uniforms. Small, private moments. A life documented not for an audience, but for herself. The post was dated October 31st, 2019, 12 days before the pizza delivery. It was a screenshot of a news article from the Orlando Sentinel. The headline read, "Shaq is still doing incredible things for Orlando families. He just doesn't tell anyone about it." The article detailed specific acts. The times he had walked into Walmart and quietly paid for strangers' full grocery carts. The Christmas toy drives. The surprise visits to schools. The checks written without press releases. It was a warm article, an admiring one. The kind of article that made readers feel good about the world for approximately the length of time it took to read it. Marisol had screenshotted it. She had posted it to her private account at 11:17 p.m. on Halloween night. Her caption was 3 words. 3 words only. Must be nice. Brianna read it. She read it again. She sat completely still at her desk for almost a full minute. Then she picked up her phone and called Shaq. He answered on the second ring. He had been awake. She told him everything. The GPA, the debate club, the essay, the UCF program, and the $340 that had kept Marisol out of it. The father who left, the mother who worked 6 days a week, the poster that Marisol had moved from the bedroom to the living room so her little brother could have something to believe in. And then she told him about the caption. Must be nice. The line went quiet. Brianna waited. She had learned a long time ago not to fill Shaq's silences. His silences were not empty. They were the sound of him thinking in the way that mattered, not performing thought, not building toward a quote, but actually sitting with something and feeling the full weight of it before he decided what to do. "Does she know who I am?" he asked finally. His voice was different, quieter than usual. quieter than the interview voice and the television voice and the boardroom voice. The other voice, the real one. "That's the thing," Brianna said, and she told him. The room was quiet for a long moment. Not uncomfortable quiet. Not the quiet of two people who don't know what to say. It was the quiet of two people who know that what needs to be said is large enough that it deserves a moment of space before anyone tries to put it into words. Darlene Denton came in from the hallway. She was still in her nursing scrubs, pale blue, her name badge clipped to the breast pocket. Because she had just come off a shift and had not had time to change before Theo came running and calling her name with that particular urgency children use when something has happened that they cannot fully explain but know is significant. She stood at the edge of the living room with her hand on Theo's shoulder, and she looked at the man on her couch, and her face did the same thing Marisol's face had done at the door. That traveling, searching, landing look. And then she simply stood very still and said nothing, because there was nothing yet that she trusted herself to say. Shaq looked at her. "I'm sorry to come without calling," he said. "I didn't want to give anyone a reason to prepare. I just wanted to talk." Darlene nodded once. She guided Theo gently toward the kitchen. "Go finish your drawing, baby," she said. Theo went, though he looked back twice over his shoulder at the giant on the couch. Darlene sat in the chair beside Marisol's. The three of them looked at each other, and then Shaq began to talk. He told them about the night in October, the car, the long way home through Paramore, the woman at the bus stop with the grocery bags, and the sleeping child, and the shoes on the wrong feet. He told it simply, without drama, the way you tell something true. He told them that he had lain awake in his house that night, thinking about what it meant to own 9 restaurants in a city where a woman stood in the cold with no bench. He told them about calling Brianna, about the pizza plan, about Terrence and the beard and the Sal's hot slice shirt that pulled across his shoulders like a sail. He told them about the Camry and the oregano smell and the cracked dashboard, and somewhere in that part of the story, Marisol made a sound that was almost a laugh, small and brief, escaping before she could decide whether to let it. And Shaq stopped and looked at her. "What?" he said. "The crack in the dashboard," she said. "I saw you looking at it when you got out of the car. I was watching from the window when you pulled up." She paused. "I thought you looked too big for that car." "I was too big for that car," Shaq said. This time the almost laugh became a real one, small and quiet, but real. And Darlene, beside her, let out a slow breath that sounded like something releasing. Shaq let the moment settle. Then he kept going. He told them what it had felt like to stand at the door. He told them about seeing the magic sticker. He told them about looking through the doorway and seeing Theo on the floor in his birthday crown. He told them about the poster, about the specific strangeness of seeing his own face on the wall of a home he had never been in a neighborhood he had driven past for years, looking down at a family he had never known existed. He told them about the exact change. When he said that, Darlene looked at her daughter. Marisol did not look back. She kept her eyes on her hands. "I knew what I had," Marisol said quietly. "I counted it out before I ordered. I wanted to make sure I had enough. I didn't want to get to the door and be short." "I know," Shaq said. "That's why I couldn't move." "After you closed the door," I stood on that path for I don't know how long because I couldn't think of anywhere I needed to be more than right there. Marisol looked up. "Why?" she said. Shaq leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. His enormous arms folded, his voice quiet and level, and entirely without performance. "Because I knew that math," he said. "My mother did that math in Newark, in San Antonio, in every city we ever moved to. She counted what she had, and she made it cover what we needed, and she never once let us see the counting. And I hadn't thought about that math in 30 years. Not really. Not from the inside." He paused. "You brought me back inside it." The room was quiet again. Outside, somewhere down Mercy Court, a child called out to another child. Theo could be heard in the kitchen. The soft scrape of crayon on paper, steadily working. Then Shaq told her about the caption. He said it plainly. He told her that Brianna had found the post, the Orlando Sentinel screenshot, the 3 words underneath it. He told her the exact words, said them aloud in the small living room on Mercy Court, so that they were no longer just something a tired girl had typed into the dark at 11:17 p.m. on Halloween night, but something real and spoken and heard. Must be nice. Marisol went very still. The color in her face changed. Not dramatically, not in the way of someone who has been caught doing something wrong, but in the way of someone who has been heard saying something they whispered, something they sent out into empty air, never expecting it to reach anyone. "I didn't mean," she started. "I know exactly what you meant," Shaq said. "And I need you to hear me when I say this." He waited until she was looking directly at him. "You were not wrong." Silence. "You were not wrong," he said again. "It is nice. It is a very specific kind of nice that I have had for so long that I stopped being able to see the shape of it clearly. I needed someone to show me the shape of it again." He looked at the poster on the wall. "You showed me." Darlene put her hand over her mouth. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way people look at ceilings when they are keeping something in. Marisol looked at the poster too, at the fierce, airborne, younger version of the man sitting on her couch. "My dad used to say you were proof," she said. Her voice was steady and clear. "That if you worked hard enough and wanted it badly enough, it didn't matter where you came from. That the door would open." She stopped. "Do you still believe that?" Shaq asked. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that it was its own kind of answer. Long enough that Shaq did not rush it. "I think," she said finally, slowly, choosing each word with the precision of someone who had been trained in debate and knew the difference between a true sentence and an easy one. "I think the door is real. I think I still believe the door is real." She looked at him. "I just think some people have to knock a lot harder to get it to open. And some people get tired of knocking before it does." Shaq looked at her for a long moment. "Then let me be the one who knocks for a while," he said, "while you rest." The room was very quiet. Darlene made a sound, small and brief and broken open, and pressed her fingers harder against her mouth. Theo called from the kitchen. "Marisol, can I have the blue crayon?" And Marisol, 16 years old, 3.8 GPA, debate champion, grocery bagger, dog walker, bill counter, sister, daughter, believer in doors, looked at the man on her couch with eyes that were full and steady and did not spill. "Yeah, baby," she called back, without looking away from Shaq. "It's in the box." Nobody moved for a moment after that. The blue crayon was in the box. Theo had it now. The soft scraping sound from the kitchen continued, steady and content. A 6-year-old completely absorbed in whatever world he was building on that piece of paper. The afternoon light through the front window had shifted while they had been talking, gone from gold to the thinner, cooler light of early evening, the kind that arrives quietly and makes rooms look both smaller and more important at the same time. Shaq looked at his hands on his knees. He looked at Darlene, who had lowered her fingers from her mouth and was sitting with the particular stillness of a woman who had been strong for so long and so continuously that she had almost forgotten what it felt like when someone else stepped into the space beside her. Not in front of her, not over her, beside. He looked at Marisol. She was looking at the poster, not at him, at the poster, at the gold and purple and the fierce airborne face, and the number 34. Looking at it the way you look at something you have seen every day for so long that you stopped actually seeing it. And then one day, something shifts, and you see it again for the first time. Really see it. All of it. What it is, and what it isn't, and what it was always trying to tell you. "I have some things I want to do," Shaq said. "For your family. I want to be clear about what they are and what they are not. They are not charity. They are not a television moment. They are not something that requires you to be grateful in front of a camera or tell your story to anyone you don't want to tell it to." He paused. "They are just doors. I want to open some doors. What you do when they open is entirely yours." Marisol turned from the poster and looked at him. "What doors?" she said. He told her. The first was education. Shaq had already spoken to his attorney the morning after Brianna's call. A private educational fund, established quietly, structured to cover full tuition, housing, books, and fees for a 4-year undergraduate degree at the University of Central Florida, pre-law track, and beyond that, contingent on Marisol's continuation, law school. The entire path. Not a one-time gesture, not a scholarship that ran out after a year. The whole road, from the first day of freshman orientation to the morning she walked across a stage with a law degree in her hand. Marisol listened to this without expression. When he finished, she said, "Why pre-law?" "Because of what you wrote," Shaq said. "In your debate application, you said you wanted to walk into rooms that poor people aren't allowed in and speak so loudly the walls shake." A long pause. "Brianna found that too," Marisol said. It was not quite a question. "Brianna finds everything," Shaq said. Something moved across Marisol's face, complicated and layered. Pride and exposure, and something that might eventually become relief. Though it was not relief yet. Relief took time. Relief came after you had been safe for long enough to believe the safety was real. "I want to pay for it myself," she said. "Eventually, I want to pay it back." "You can pay it forward," Shaq said. "That counts more." The second thing was Evans High School. Shaq placed a phone call to Principal Raymond Okafor, a man who had led the school for 11 years with the stubborn, unglamorous dedication of an educator who understood that showing up consistently was its own form of heroism. The call was direct and specific. An anonymous donation of $40,000 earmarked for 3 things: the debate team, the after-school tutoring program, and an emergency student fund, a fund designed specifically for situations like Marisol's UCF summer program, where $340 stood between a student and an opportunity that could alter the entire direction of their life. Raymond Okafor asked no questions about the source of the donation. He said, "I've been trying to build that emergency fund for 3 years." "I know," Shaq said. "How do you know?" Raymond said. "Brianna," Shaq said. Raymond Okafor laughed, a real laugh, full and warm, and said he would put the money to work immediately. Patricia Ochoa, the school counselor who had written the hardship report flagging Marisol's situation 2 months earlier, arrived at school the following Monday to find an email from the principal informing her that the emergency student fund she had been requesting since 2017 was now fully operational and ready for applications. She read the email twice. She did not know where the money had come from. She sent the principal a reply that consisted of 3 exclamation points and nothing else, which was the most unprofessional email she had ever sent and which she did not regret at all. For Theo, Shaq did something smaller, deliberately smaller, because Theo was 6, and 6-year-olds did not need grand gestures. They needed things they could hold. On December 20th, 2019, 8 days before Christmas, a package arrived at the house on Mercy Court. Inside, a birthday card, handwritten, signed "Happy Belated Birthday, Buddy. Keep wearing that crown. A friend." A pair of Orlando Magic tickets for a home game in January. 2 seats for Marisol and Theo, close enough to the court to feel the squeak of sneakers on hardwood. And a basketball, signed on the sweet spot in black marker, the signature large and unmistakable to anyone who knew what they were looking at. Theo did not know what he was looking at. He held the basketball with both arms and looked at the signature the way he looked at things he found interesting but couldn't yet read. "Who wrote on the ball?" he asked Marisol. Marisol looked at the signature. She looked at her brother. "A friend," she said. Theo accepted this completely. He put the ball on the milk crate bookshelf, in the space he cleared by moving 2 paperback books aside, and stood back and looked at it with great satisfaction. The way people look at things they have decided belong exactly where they have put them. He looked at the ball. He looked at the poster. He looked at the ball again. His brow furrowed very slightly, with the beginnings of a thought he didn't yet have the words for. Then he went to find the blue crayon. For Darlene, Shaq made one more call. He had learned, through Brianna, that Orlando Regional Medical Center had a continuing education program for CNAs seeking to qualify as registered nurses. A significant step up in both responsibility and pay that Darlene had quietly researched 3 years earlier before concluding that she could not afford the time or the course fees while working 6 days a week. Shaq covered the course fees in full, anonymously, through the hospital's existing financial assistance program so that it appeared to Darlene as a standard institutional grant. She would not know. She would think she had been selected from the applicant pool. She enrolled in January 2020. She cried in the hospital parking lot for a few minutes before her shift. Then she went inside because there were patients, and she was the person who showed up. The Obi Ferreira footage was never released. Shaq reviewed it once. He sat in his house in Isleworth and watched himself on a laptop screen, walking up the dirt path, knocking on the green door, standing in the warm light from inside while Marisol told him the pizza was late and the garlic knots were cold. He watched himself walk back to the Camry and stand with his palms flat on the cold roof, and breathe. He watched it once, all the way through. Then he closed the laptop and called Brianna. "Keep it," he said. "Don't send it anywhere. Don't pitch it. Don't let anyone know it exists." "The story is good, Shaq," Brianna said carefully. I know what people would do with it," he said. "That's why I'm keeping it." There was a pause. "This wasn't content," he said. "It wasn't a segment. It wasn't a brand moment." Another pause, and in it, the sound of someone who had thought about this very carefully. That girl counted out $18.74 for her little brother's birthday. That is hers. That belongs to her. I'm not putting it on the internet. Brianna was quiet. "Okay," she said. She kept the footage. The lesson, the real one, the one underneath all the other ones, is not about fame or money or what powerful people can do for powerless ones when they finally decide to look. It is about Marisol at 11:17 p.m. on Halloween, typing 3 words into the dark because she was tired and honest and needed somewhere for the truth to go. Must be nice. And it is about what happened when the man those 3 words were aimed at, not in cruelty, not in hatred, just in exhausted honesty, actually showed up at her door. Not the famous version of him, not the branded version, the man version, the Newark version, the version that remembered what it felt like to be the kid whose clothes never fit. That version knocked. That version came back. That version sat on a couch with a torn cushion and said, "Let me knock for a while you rest." Shaquille O'Neal continues to operate quietly in the communities where he was made and the communities where he made his name. He is still a reserve deputy. He still walks into stores sometimes and pays for strangers without being asked. Evans High School's Emergency Student Fund is still active. Marisol Denton is in her 3rd year of undergraduate studies, pre-law, on track for everything she wrote about in that essay at 15. The rooms, the walls, the shaking. Theo Denton still has the basketball on the milk crate shelf. He still doesn't know whose signature is on it. He still stands in front of the poster sometimes, the way he always has. Chin up, looking at the man in gold and purple with the total, unquestioning faith of someone who has never been given a reason to doubt. He still thinks the man in the poster is the strongest person in the whole world. He is not wrong. He just doesn't know yet that the strongest thing that man ever did had nothing to do with basketball. It was coming back to Mercy Court. It was sitting on the couch. It was saying, "I know that math." It was listening until the room got quiet enough to hear what actually needed to be said. If this story moved you even a little, if it made you think about the delivery guy at your door differently, or the 16-year-old counting quarters somewhere in your city, or the simple, powerful truth that showing up for people is the strongest thing any of us can ever do, then this video did exactly what it was supposed to do. Before you go, drop a comment and tell us where in the world you are watching this from right now. It could be a small town. It could be a big city. It could be a place a lot like Paramore. It could be a place a lot like Isleworth. Wherever you are, we want to know. Because kindness does not belong to one neighborhood or one zip code or one famous man in a fake beard. It belongs to all of us, in every city, on every street, including yours. If this story is worth spreading, and we believe it is, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it puts this story in front of someone who might need to hear it today. Someone who might be tired. Someone who might be counting exact change. Someone who might just need to know that somebody came back and knocked on the door. And if you want more stories like this one, real stories, human stories, the kind that remind you what people are actually capable of when they choose to pay attention, subscribe to this channel. Join this community, because we are here every week looking for the stories the world almost missed. Now click the video on your screen right now. The next story is already waiting for you, and it is just as powerful as this one.